When Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett calmly raised questions about Melania Trump's visa background, it was not just a moment meant to stun the room. It became a reflection of America's most deep-rooted hypocrisy. It was one of those moments that makes everything stop, like the air itself seems to pause to pay attention. The hearing room on Capitol Hill had been noisy for over an hour. Accusations flew back and forth, tempers were rising, cameras kept recording the usual chaos. And there was Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett sitting still, focused, turning through her documents as if the shouting echoing off the walls did not disturb her, but it did. You could notice it in how her hand froze mid-motion, in how her eyes moved across the panelists in front of her. "You question my loyalty to this country," she said, staring forward, without raising her voice or showing fear. "If we are heading in that direction, should we also discuss Melania's visa background?" The entire room fell silent, not just in a figurative sense, but truly silent. The Republican panelist had been firing off subtle remarks about who counts as a real American, looked as if someone had just cut the power inside his head. Even a few Democrats seemed unsure whether they had heard her correctly. Yet, Crockett showed no reaction, no smile, no sense of triumph. She held her gaze steady, as if she had planned for this exact moment all along, and had simply been waiting for the right time to speak. That single sentence struck with more force than any prepared speech, any catchy slogan, or any official statement. When that moment aired, only 10 seconds taken from a hearing that lasted 2 hours, Twitter burst into activity like dry leaves catching fire. By the time the hearing wrapped up, her name was trending online. Hashtags such as "Jasmine said it" and "Melania green card" spread quicker than journalists could respond. Yet here was the part many people overlooked. She never called for anyone to be deported. She did not declare that Melania should leave the country. What she said, and the precise way she delivered it, was calculated. Because for years, immigrant families, particularly black and brown families, have been questioned, doubted, and dissected by people waving flags and asking charged questions like, "Do you even love this country?" Crockett turned that same lens back on them. It was never solely about Melania. It was about selective anger, double standards, and the way some individuals always seem to invent barriers between us and them. But the backlash, it arrived quickly. That very night, conservative radio programs broadcast headlines such as, "Democrat attacks Melania's immigration status," and "Did Crockett just suggest deporting a former First Lady?" Those headlines were loud, but the actual video clip told a very different story. And that was what made her words land even harder, because people were not just reacting to what she said. They were reacting to the truth she revealed. By the next morning, Crockett had received 3 interview invitations, including one from a well-known morning show. Her staff, though tired, understood they had to respond quickly. "Do we say nothing?" her assistant asked, pacing the floor. Crockett merely shook her head. "No," she said. "We say everything, just not in the way they expect us to." Meanwhile, while her words were playing on screens all over America, something deeper was stirring beneath it all, and it was not going to fade away quietly. Long before that congressional hearing, long before cameras focused on her faces, though she were the only person in the room, Jasmine Crockett had already accepted how others might see her. She understood what it meant to speak plainly in a place driven by polished lies and polite gestures. She knew that as a black woman in power who did not soften her words or try to fit into a mold of respectability, she would always be labeled as angry, radical, or worse, ungrateful. But none of this was new to her. Before Congress, she was fighting for clients in Dallas courtrooms. She worked as a public defender, with no media spotlight, no cameras, only stories. Mothers trying to keep custody of their children. Teenagers pulled over for reasons that never made sense. Men judged the instant they entered the courtroom, not by evidence, but by where they came from or how they looked. She recalled one case in particular, a quiet young man, 19 years old, arrested for possession during a traffic stop that never should have occurred. He had no record, nothing violent, yet the prosecution refused to relent. She stood in court and said, "You are building cages around this boy's future for something you would not even arrest your nephew for. It shook the judge. She did not win the case outright, but she won the room, and the young man received probation rather than jail time. She carried that same determination into every place she entered afterward, from the Texas House of Representatives all the way to Capitol Hill. But Washington, that was an entirely different playing field. In Congress, you are expected to be clever, which often means you are supposed to speak less, blend in, keep things polite, smile, in when it hurts. Jasmine never enjoyed pretending to be unaware, and she certainly was not about to stay silent. So, when she sat in that hearing room facing a confident former prosecutor from Florida who kept tossing out terms like American values and foundational loyalty, she was not speaking out of pure emotion. She was challenging a pattern she had watched repeat her entire life, and she was fed up with it, because the cycle was always the same. First, they question your background, then your intentions, then your loyalty to this country, and when you finally speak back, calmly, and with facts, they resent that you dared to say anything. It is not simply frustrating, it is dangerous. That is why her statement, "Should we talk about Melania's visa history too?" did not come out of nowhere. It was shaped by years of witnessing how double standards thrive openly. Let us be honest, Melania Trump's immigration journey had long seemed unclear. The modeling visas, the dates that did not align, the quiet discussions about green cards, work permits, and sponsorship paperwork that never received clear answers. Yet none of it ever seemed to matter, because she married the right man, had the right accent, and wore the right shoes. And Jasmine Crockett, she dared to mention it. Not as rumor, not as a cheap shot, but as a clear, undeniable comparison, one that struck a nerve for some people. That is why the backlash arrived so quickly. Why headlines twisted her words before she even finished her sentence. But Crockett stayed firm, because she was not simply speaking off the cuff. She was drawing from a lifetime of times when people like her were told to show documents, explain their accents, and prove that they belonged here. So no, that hearing was not her acting on impulse. It was her refusing to allow one more lie about loyalty to go unchallenged. But outside that hearing room, another conflict was growing, carrying Trump's influence all over it. By sunset, Jasmine Crockett's name was circulating everywhere, and Donald Trump took notice. His first post appeared on Truth Social just before 10 p.m. It was written entirely in capital letters, as though the keyboard itself had been shouting, "Disgusting attack on Melania. Jasmine Crockett should be ashamed of herself. She should apologize to the First Lady immediately." Then another message followed. "These people hate America. They hate success. They hate beauty. They want to cancel patriots and protect criminals. Melania came here legally. Crockett is a nobody looking for ratings." Reactions poured in like fuel feeding a fire. Some individuals, already eager to blame someone for every problem in their lives, clung to Trump's words like truth. They did not even bother watching the video clip. They were uninterested in what was actually said. The headline was enough for them. And suddenly, Jasmine's name was not just trending. It was connected to words like traitor, racist, and un-American. Cable news joined in as well. By midnight, her face was being shown across 3 different networks, each running their own narrative of what had taken place. Some aired the video, others only displayed a screenshot and quoted her words out of context, making it appear as though Crockett had personally gone into the East Wing demanding Melania's deportation. Her phone was buzzing without pause. Text, calls, social media mentions, messages of hate, threats against her life. And some people, the ones who truly knew better, people started asking, "Are you alright?" But she was not shaken, because Crockett understood exactly what Trump was doing. It was his usual move: turn anger into a distraction, toss out statements to rile his supporters, and never directly answer the real issue. The strange part was that his post did not actually defend Melania's immigration record. He did not correct anything Jasmine had said. Instead, he simply reacted loud, furious, emotional, and counted on everyone else to follow his lead. Her chief of staff, Lane Robbins, was still at the office when the news hit. "Here we go," Lane murmured, watching a flood of headlines appear. Jasmine walked in holding a mug of chamomile tea, just as composed as ever. Melania is trending under Ted Einstein visa, she said, raising an eyebrow. I did not even start that one, Lane replied with a faint smile. You know they will try to attack you over this. They have been trying, she said, sitting down in the chair. Now, they just have better lighting. She did not post anything that night. She did not respond to Trump or throw any counterattack. Instead, her team uploaded the entire, uncut video of the hearing to her official YouTube channel. No edits, no voiceover, just the recording. Her voice, her words, her evidence, the truth without interruption. Within an hour, the video had over 800,000 views. People were not only watching, they were analyzing it, examining every detail, sharing it with captions like, "Watch the whole thing. She did not lie," and interesting how they can criticize others but cannot handle criticism themselves. Meanwhile, Trump kept posting regularly, every few hours. Each message grew angrier than the last. Some did not even mention Jasmine by name anymore. Instead, they tossed out terms like radical left, race baiters, America haters. But the tactic was not working like it once did, because this time, people were beginning to ask questions, some of them uncomfortable. Questions like, why is a black congresswoman being called racist for stating a fact? Or, why does no one want to discuss Melania's immigration story? Or the hardest question of all, why do the rules seem to only apply to certain people? Even a few conservative commentators, the ones who still tried to appear committed to honesty, admitted that Crockett had not lied. She had not even insulted Melania. She had simply asked a question, and that made people more nervous than any insult could have. But while debates raged across social media, something else was taking place, something less visible, but about to shift everything. By dawn, Crockett's video had reached audiences across state lines, not just in viewership, but in tone. Local news outlets in places like Fresno, Tulsa, and Dayton were airing the clip, then asking a simple question, was she wrong? And that became a problem for her critics, because she had not fabricated anything. She had not yelled. She had not hurled insults. She had asked a question calmly and directly, with a tone that could not be twisted, and now millions were watching that footage and deciding for themselves. By 9 o'clock a.m., she was scheduled for 2 national interviews, one with MSNBC, the other with CBS Mornings. She chose CBS first. Her team gathered in a small studio just off Connecticut Avenue. Hair, makeup, microphones. As they prepared, Lane scrolled through the latest headlines, reading a few aloud. Crockett's swipe at Melania stirs national debate. That one is fair, Jasmine said. But then there's, is this what decency looks like now? From the Sentinel. And my personal favorite, she added, Congresswoman weaponizes immigration history in political ambush. Jasmine lifted her eyebrow. Ambush? I asked a question. The same kind people ask those who look like me every single day on CBS. Anchor Elaine Trute got straight to the point. Congresswoman, you have been accused of attacking the former First Lady. Do you believe your remarks went too far? Jasmine did not hesitate. She leaned forward, eyes steady. I find it interesting how asking a question about fairness suddenly gets labeled as an attack. What I said was not outrageous. What is outrageous is that people are more upset about me saying it than they are about the double standards it reveals. Trute nodded slowly. So, you are saying this was not personal? I do not know Melania. I do not wish her harm, Jasmine said. But if we are going to keep pretending that this country treats everyone equally, then we need to tell the truth. Some people are allowed to make mistakes during the process and still be celebrated. Others make one small error and end up facing deportation proceedings. That short clip, just 40 seconds long, was reshared more than 4 million times. Meanwhile, the usual voices on cable news were furious. One anchor on Patriot Channel News called her bitter woman with a vendetta. Another claimed she hated traditional American families. But the attacks were not sticking. People were watching Jasmine speak, observing how she carried herself, and coming to a realization that even her harshest critics were reluctant to admit she was not wrong. At the same time, Twitter was exploding in a different way. Young immigrants began sharing their own experience under the hashtag #IamJasmine. Stories of constantly needing to prove that they belong, of being pulled out of lines, facing extra questions, waiting longer, and dealing with greater suspicion. One user wrote, "My mom was nearly deported for a typo in her paperwork. But Melania, she kept renewing her modeling visa how many times?" Jasmine said what needed to be said. Still, the backlash was real. Her team had to shut down the office email account after it was flooded with thousands of hateful messages. Some people were simply angry, while others turned violent. One message read, "Keep your mouth shut, or we will do it for her." Lane flagged that particular message for the FBI, but Crockett refused to step back. Later that same afternoon, she sat down for an interview with a college journalist from Ann Arbor who asked her, "Did you ever think about apologizing?" Jasmine tilted her head slightly and answered, "Apologize for what? For telling the truth? For asking the same kind of question that people like me get asked all the time? That is not something I feel sorry for. That is something I wish more people were brave enough to do." And that was exactly what made her a threat in some people's eyes. She did not shout. She did not cry. She did not withdraw. She just kept showing up and saying things others were too nervous to voice, always with calmness, composure, and clarity. She was not trying to win an argument. She was shifting the conversation itself. While Crockett stood firm under the national spotlight, a different response was forming away from the cameras, one that would soon turn the story into something bigger than politics. The first major spark ignited in Mesa, Arizona. A protest had already been planned outside the federal courthouse, meant initially to focus on the rising number of undocumented deportation cases that were quietly happening, without widespread media coverage. But after the Crockett video exploded online, organizers changed their signs. Her name appeared everywhere. One woman, Ana Ruiz, 27, born in Flagstaff to parents who emigrated from Mexico in the early 1990s, stood on the courthouse steps, holding a cardboard sign reading, "If she gets to stay, so should my dad." It was direct, personal, and impossible to overlook. The protest quickly grew. It was not enormous like the marches seen in coastal cities, but it was loud, visible, and full of raw emotion. Over 500 people came out: teachers, nurses, veterans, students, some holding handmade signs, others carrying photographs of family members strapped in green card limbo. And through the noise, a single chant rose up: same rules, same rights, no more silence. The Mesa protest made it onto the evening news not because of violence, since there was none, but because it tied the Crockett debate directly to ordinary people's lives. All at once, this stopped being only about politics. It became about families, about fairness, and about the two different sets of rules that everyone had pretended did not exist, even in places where people might not expect it, like Shreveport, Louisiana, or Lincoln, Nebraska. Small town gatherings were filled with talk about Crockett's moment. High school debate coaches started using it as a live example. Civics teachers played the video clip in class. In Birmingham, a college professor paused her lecture and asked, "Let us discuss this. Why does it make people so uneasy?" Meanwhile, conservative media tried to drown out the discussion with noise. One syndicated host said, "This is what happens when people who hate this country get into office. They attack good women like Melania, push their bitter, divisive nonsense." But the argument was not landing the way it once did. Even some of Trump's more moderate supporters were quietly saying things like, "Well, technically she did not lie, and you have to admit, it is a valid question." Then, almost like it was timed, someone pulled the metaphorical fire alarm. A new video started spreading on Reddit. It appeared to come from a 2001 interview Melania gave to a Slovenian television outlet, where she made vague statements about working in the United States before all her paperwork was finalized. It was not solid proof of anything, but it was enough to stir up curiosity about something the public had never questioned too closely. That was when the conversation shifted, because now it was not just about whether Crockett had crossed a line. It became, wait, what are the actual facts here? Fact checkers began digging in. Immigration attorneys started weighing in. People unearthed old reports that had mostly been ignored for years, the kind of stories no one paid attention to when Melania was photographed in designer gowns. Suddenly, the question Crockett asked did not seem extreme anymore, it was impossible to avoid. In Phoenix, a woman named Darnisha Fuller sat at her dining table, scrolling through the news on her tablet. She turned to her husband and said, "She is not saying Melania should be deported. She is saying that if they are going to treat us like suspects, then we have the right to ask questions too." Her husband nodded slowly. "People do not like mirrors," he muttered, "especially when they do not recognize what is staring back at them." Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett was focused on legislation, not a flashy bill, nothing that would grab camera attention, but a quiet amendment that would demand full transparency from high-profile immigration applicants. And no more sealed documents, no more special loopholes for wealthy or influential individuals. She did not announce it immediately. She was waiting, not because she was afraid, but because she understood timing. But while Crockett was preparing for what came next, someone from her past was about to show up, bringing something no one could have predicted. The threats against her were growing more severe. Crockett's team had stopped opening physical mail unless it came through official channels. Too many handwritten letters filled with slurs, ripped flags, and only once a bullet casing taped inside an envelope. The FBI had quietly begun monitoring her office. But Jasmine refused to let it change how she worked. "They want you to be scared," she told Lane one night, standing by the office window, looking at the city lights flickering in the distance. "They want to see you shrink." The truth was, she was tired, not defeated, not broken, just tired. It was late, close to midnight, when she finally left the office and headed home. No staff, no phone calls, just silence. Her apartment in Tacoma did not look like a politician's home. No official photos, no framed invitations, just soft lighting, a couch worn from many naps, and an old photo of her and her mother at her law school graduation, still stuck to the refrigerator with the cracked magnet. She slipped off her shoes, reheated some leftover curry, and sat at her kitchen table, laptop open, scrolling through messages, skipping the hateful ones and reading those that seemed sincere. One message caught her attention, a voicemail from earlier that day. It was her mother's voice. "Hey baby, I know you are busy, but remember what I told you. They do not get to define you, not ever. Not even when it is loud, especially when it is loud." She played it twice, then called her mother back. Her mother answered right away, no hesitation, as if she had been waiting by the phone all day. "Hey mama, hey baby, are you okay? I am holding." "That is not what I asked." Jasmine did not answer right away. Her voice caught for a moment. "They are trying to twist this. They are saying I hate the country, saying I am attacking women." Her mother did not yell or rant. She simply let the silence fill the space. Then she said, "Truth does not always come out clean. Sometimes it comes out with bruises, but it still comes out." Those words hit deeply. They talked for another 20 minutes about everyday things. Church, her uncle's arthritis, the neighbor who could not figure out their new leaf blower. Jasmine laughed for the first time in days. That laughter carried her into the next morning because the pressure was still there, and the calls continued. One of them was from someone she had not spoken to in years, Eli Kwan, a former immigration lawyer had once worked alongside her at a legal clinic in Oak Park, Texas. They had not spoken since she left for Congress, but his name appeared on her calendar as a private meeting, with no subject line listed. He arrived carrying a manila enveloping dies that looked like he had not slept in 2 days. "Are we secure?" he asked, sitting across from her. Lane closed the office door. Eli slid the folder across the desk. "This is not public yet, but it will be. And when it is going to change this whole story." Inside were scanned documents, old records, immigration paperwork, correspondence tied to Melania Trump's early visa applications. One letter, in particular, stood out, a request for reconsideration mentioning freelance work done before official work permits were granted. Jasmine read it twice, then leaned back. "You have verified this?" "Yes." Quietly. "I had to check it 3 times. I have been holding onto it for weeks, but now it matters." Lane stared at the folder as if it might explode. "Why give this to me?" Jasmine asked. Eli let out a breath. "Because you did not lie, and because you are the only one saying what everyone else is afraid to say. Jasmine closed the folder carefully. Her hands did not shake. Her voice stayed calm. She only said, "All right, let us get prepared." But while they were getting ready to release something that might completely change the conversation, someone else unexpected was also following the headlines and preparing to speak out. They came in waves. Not politicians, not media personality, but ordinary people. Everyday people had grown tired of all the noise, who saw something in Jasmine Crockett's question that felt honest, personal, and familiar. The first voice came from El Paso. A young teacher named Marisol Jimenez posted a short video on Instagram. No background music, no fancy effects, just her standing in front of a whiteboard still marked with lesson notes. "I am not here to talk about political parties," she said. "But I will say this: I have had to explain to my third graders their parents have to carry certain documents everywhere they go. And those same third graders are watching adults become angry because someone dared to question how a white European woman arrived here. Think about that." The clip went viral, over 3 million views in just a weekend. Comments poured in from teachers, students, and parents, all echoing the same thought: the system is not equal. And when someone finally speaks up, they become the problem. In Minneapolis, a former Army veteran named Andre Colvin Black, 58, full beard, slow speaker, uploaded a video from his backyard. Birds chirped softly while he sat on a plastic lawn chair, holding a glass of iced tea. "I served this country," he said, voice steady, "twice. And I still get asked where I am really from. I do not know this Congresswoman personally, but she asked a question I have been biting my tongue on for years. If that makes her an American, then what does that make me?" Then came the younger generation. College students in Sacramento organized a sit-in. They were not shouting, not angry. They just sat quietly, each holding signs with questions written on them. Who gets to belong? Why do documents matter more for some? What if she was right? Photos of the sit-in spread across Twitter, then TikTok, and finally appeared in the New York Times. A barber shop in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. An older man named Harold Sims was cutting hair when a customer asked if he had seen news about Jasmine. Harold paused mid-fade and said, "She did not say anything I have not said right here 100 times. The only difference is she said it in front of a camera." The barbershop fell silent for a moment. Then someone murmured, "Yeah, but she said it better." It was not just praise. It was clarity. People were not gathering around her because she shouted. They were supporting her because she did not. Because in a world overwhelmed with noise, someone calmly asking a clear question felt more powerful than any slogan. And quietly, almost without anyone noticing, Crockett's approval numbers started to climb. Independents, young voters, second-generation immigrants, even a small number of moderate conservatives, not all agreed with her politics, but they respected how she carried herself. No insults, no spin, just facts delivered with strength. One newspaper in Toledo published a Sunday opinion piece titled, "The Question Heard Round the Country." The writer, a 60-year-old pastor, said, "We can argue about tone, we can argue about timing, but what we cannot argue with is the truth." The only reason that question unsettled so many people is because, deep down, they already knew the answer. Meanwhile, Jasmine kept going. She did not try to ride the wave. She did not post victory messages online. Instead, she spent the week visiting schools, veteran centers, and sitting in on immigration hearings without any cameras present. She simply kept showing up. That was her response. And yet, even as public support grew, there were whispers, significant ones. Because when the documents from Eli Kwan's folder finally started circulating, carefully leaked through reputable journalists and confirmed by legal experts, the discussion shifted once again. Reporters began asking, if this paperwork is legitimate, why has it never been explained? People began asking. Former Homeland Security staff would not comment. The Trump team issued a vague statement calling it misinformation. But the scanned documents were clear. Dates did not match, and statements clashed with official filings. It was not a smoking gun, not exactly. But it was smoke, real smoke. And once smoke appears, people start looking for fire. But before the blaze could spread, Someone much closer to Melania was about to speak out, and what she said would turn everything upside down. She had not spoken publicly in over 5 years. Not since leaving the administration. Not even when her book was released. Yet on a gray Thursday morning, without warning, Melania Trump's former aide, a woman named Sonia Lavelle, appeared on a podcast called The Politic Room, hosted by former journalist Brian Voss. The episode dropped without any teasers or announcements, just Sonia's voice, quiet but steady. "I never thought I would be doing this," she began. "But watching what happened to Jasmine Crockett this week made me feel like staying silent was the same as helping cover it up." And just like that, the nation's focus shifted again. Sonia had worked closely with Melania for years, managing schedules, travel, public relations. She was not a big name. Most people would not know her unless they read internal staff documents, but she had been there, and she remembered everything. "There were always questions," Sonia said, "about the visa timelines, about the work history. I remember once, back in 2001, Melania became really anxious after a magazine started asking about her modeling jobs before she received her green card. She said, 'I do not want people going through my paperwork.' And I remember thinking, why would they?" The host leaned forward. "Are you saying she admitted she was undocumented at some point?" Sonia paused. "I am saying the timeline never added up, and we all knew it did not, but no one wanted to be the one who said it publicly." That single quote made headlines within the hour. By the next day, it was everywhere: CNN, USA Today, local newspapers from Reno to Tallahassee. Jasmine Crockett did not respond right away. She did not need to. The story was moving on its own. Fact-checkers, who had been cautious until then, began digging deeper. One investigation from the Austin Ledger revealed that Melania's H-1B visa came with specific work limits, and dates from her modeling jobs might have broken those rules. Back when she was First Lady, the White House dismissed the questions, calling it just a paperwork problem. But now, in this moment, that explanation was not enough, because the country was already questioning what fairness meant. When Jasmine Crockett first asked her question, people called her divisive. Now that the answers were emerging, people were not so sure, and quietly, something else began to change. A shift. Radio hosts who had spent days calling Crockett terrible names began to soften their language. They did not issue apologies, not openly, but their tone changed. "She might have had a point," they admitted. One person said, "I still think her delivery was a bit confrontational, but maybe there is a double standard we need to talk about." It was not a full admission, but it was a start. In Jacksonville, a retired immigration officer named Kendra Blaine posted a video on Facebook, looking straight into the camera. "I have handled over 8,000 cases in my career. If any of those people had the same inconsistencies on record as Melania, their cases would have been denied or flagged for further review. We need to stop pretending this is normal." Her video reached 2 million views within 48 hours. From there, the floodgates opened. Crockett's inbox started to change. Less hate mail, more notes of thanks, personal stories, confessions, and questions from people who finally felt someone had cracked the door open for them. Yet Jasmine did not boast. At her next press conference, she stood before a simple backdrop that read, "Same rules, same country." All she said was, "I did not come here to play games. I came to represent the people who never get the benefit of the doubt." This was never about Melania. This was about principle. If one group must follow the rules, then everyone should. Period. It was not fiery. It was not long, but it made an impact. People applauded, not because they were expected to, but because the truth finally seemed clear. But before this moment could settle, one final interview was about to air, one that would show exactly why Crockett's question mattered so much. The studio lights were bright, but Jasmine Crockett was steady. She sat comfortably across from Maya Redding, anchor of the Sunday night primetime series Truth Seat. It was the highest-rated political program of the year, and this was Jasmine's first in-depth interview since the controversy began. There was no podium to stand behind, no staff to step in, just 2 chairs, one question after another, with millions of viewers watching. Maya began directly. "Congresswoman Crockett, you have become the center of a national debate that, technically, You did not start. When you made your comment about Melania Trump's visa history, did you expect this kind of reaction? Jasmine blinked once and gave a small smile. I expected discomfort. I did not expect distortion. Maya leaned forward. So, let's go back. What were you trying to say? Jasmine paused, not to stall for time, but to choose her words carefully. What I said, and what I meant, was about consistency. We have built a system in this country that constantly questions the legitimacy of certain people, whether it is their last name, their accent, or where they were born. And those who do the questioning rarely get questioned themselves. She gestured gently with her hand. Melania Trump is one example. She benefited from a process that many others would have been punished for. That is not an insult. That is not hatred. That is simply reality. Maya nodded. But some people say, mentioning the former First Lady's immigration status was a personal attack. Then they are not listening, Jasmine said. I was not talking about her as a person. I was talking about what her story represents, how some people quietly get a pass, while others get publicly prosecuted. I have defended teenagers who ended up facing ICE holds because of minor clerical mistakes, while at the same time, we are told not to ask questions about inconsistencies tied to people in power. Why is that? A brief silence followed, the kind that speaks louder than shouting. Maya shifted in her seat. You have also received a lot of support rallies, opinion pieces, even unexpected praise from moderate voters. Why do you think people connected with you? They saw someone ask a question they have been carrying inside for years, Jasmine replied. They saw someone who did not back down when the backlash came. But more than that, they saw how fast the conversation shifts and becomes twisted when the truth challenges power. Maya offered a small smile. And now, there is talk of you as a national figure, possibly running for Senate, even whispers of higher office. Your thoughts? Jasmine let out a soft laugh, not dismissive, but sincere. I did not say what I said for political ambition. I said it because I was tired of watching people swallow their truth, just to keep others comfortable. Backstage, Lane watched from the green room, phone in hand, jaw tight. The studio had given them only one live feed, and she was studying it not for mistakes, but for the effect it was having. And she could see it. People were not simply watching Jasmine. They were connecting, not to a headline, not to a short clip, but to a real person. After the interview, social media buzzed again, though this time, not in chaos, but in thought. Clips from the conversation were posted and reposted. One line, in particular, stuck.